Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Hi, I'm Jenny McCafferty for the Michigan Golfer, and today we're with Jim Nelson, who some of us might acknowledge as the official historian of Washtenaw Golf Club, formerly known as Washtenaw Country Club. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it sure is. In fact, it's almost as though your family has had an affair with this golf club going way back.
Quite a ways back.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
Your dad was chairman of the 50th anniversary celebration?
He was, yes. That story, my parents came to Michigan around 1935 from New Jersey, and they were living in Detroit. And my dad worked for the Rexall Drug Company, and he was calling on the local Rexall drug store in Ypsilanti, and one of the owners there brought him out to see Washtenaw Country Club. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of it for him. He almost immediately joined Washtenaw, and they moved to Ypsilanti.
Oh, no kidding.
Right.
That's pretty cool. And your mom has her own place in Michigan golf history. Tell us a little bit about what she did.
Well,
Mary, her name is Mary.
Mary Nelson, yeah. She was, of course, played golf here and was active in the women's group here at Washtenaw. And then I was in high school, so I think it was in the late. The idea came about starting a Michigan women's senior tournament. And their biggest concern was whether or not they could get women to admit that they were more than 50 years old in order to play in the tournament.
Oh, that's good.
So I can remember, I'd come home at night and say, oh, we got another 10 entrants today. And so they started here at Washtenaw, and the inaugural event was very, very successful, and they formed the Michigan Women's Golf Association, and my mother was elected to be the first president of that. So,
wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, two movers and shakers, if you will.
Well, yeah, they participated here,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and carrying on, you yourself were chairman of the centennial celebration.
Correct, yeah. See, probably by default, they knew that my dad had been chairman in 1949. So,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, it was a great kind of honor for me to do that, and,
Yeah.
especially because of my dad's history.
Yeah. And this book really celebrates the centennial. Tell us a little bit about how the book itself came to be.
Well, I think that when we started that process of trying to figure out what we would do with the 100th anniversary, we thought that it was really important to try to capsulize the history in one place. And we were very, very fortunate. Bill Sliger, who had been a long-time member here at Washtenaw, ran the newspaper in Northville and was in the printing business. And Bill agreed to head up the effort to do that book, and it would not look like it came out if it hadn't been for Bill and his expertise. Mm-hmm. And so he really coordinated the whole thing and put it together, and I think it came out pretty well.
Well, the book itself has been a great resource for all the stories we've been trying to do on the course to celebrate the 125th. This is coming up soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Another mark in the history of Washtenaw.
Right. Well, some of the things that always strike me is this place was old enough that in the old days, sheep were in charge of cutting the grass.
Yeah. I never saw the sheep.
I know. Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I thought was kind of funny in the olden days is that the caddies, their job was to carry clubs, mm-hmm. to find the ball, and to chase the sheep off the greens.
Right, yeah. And I mean, through the later history of Washtenaw, caddies were an important part of what went on here, because they had a strong caddy program, and we had at least one young man that was about the same age as I growing up, Chuck Barnes, who was selected to be a caddy and received an Evans scholarship to attend the University of Michigan. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. And the Evans scholarships are for caddies.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We met with some caddies who at French Lick Resort who were caddies when they were little kids, and now they're old enough to tell good stories. So it's always fun to talk to people who used to be the caddies. Yeah, it's pretty cool. One of the people who's kind of important here is Ken McLaughlin. He's he was described in this book like 25 years ago as a veteran gardener. And one of the things that really distinguishes Washtenaw Golf Club is the landscaping and the flowers.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a wonderful job, and it's nice to just drive in and see the beds around the clubhouse. They're beautiful.
Yeah, they always are, and it changes with the seasons. McLaughlin, who's always busy because he takes care of all the flowers, and I don't think any golf club has prettier flowers.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
It's something that's disappearing from golf courses in general, I hear.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you wouldn't know it here. They're in front as you drive in. They're all around the clubhouse. They're all around the course. So, how did you first get interested in flowers?
Well, long time ago, about 30 years ago, when I started here, I was just a member of the crew, and I was did flowers about half the day and worked on the crew the other half. Okay. And all they had was annuals at the time. This was decades ago. And I just asked my boss one day, what do you think about we switch the general theme up of including some shrubs and perennials and make it a little more complex? And he agreed, and off I went. I went to the Master Gardener classes here in Ann Arbor.
Kidding.
Yes. Wow. And just found a love for it and continued.
So you find all different colors, all different shapes, all different, some are little, some are tall. How do you go about picking the right flower for the place? Like right behind us.
Well, essentially it's first I think about light, how much light the plants need, and if this area will have that. And then there's soil drainage, things of that nature. And then as you're progressing into the garden, you're mixing colors, textures. Plants have different texture, leaves have different texture. All those things you combine in an element that is pleasing to the eyes.
So all that stuff you think about so we don't have to.
Exactly.
Well, Ken, it's always a treat to come. Even though we're here several times a week, I always notice something different. So congratulations on making it such a fun experience.
Well, thanks very much. It's my pleasure.
Wanted to talk about this group of people who are mentioned in the book called the Old Guys, which I think is kind of a funny way to describe anybody. And never mind trying to find women over 50.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that group. It met Tuesday through Sunday at 10:30 a.m. for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I think it just was a situation where a group, I don't know, there may have been 20 or so of them, were at an age where they were retired, and golf was an important part of their life, and they had been playing here at Washtenaw for a long time, and I think it just formed and developed without any real structure to it. It's just that everybody showed up and they made their groups up and off they went.
Yeah, I think having an appointed time every week really helps because you don't have to call people up and make appointments and arrange tea times. It just happens.
Yeah, one of the really wonderful things about Washtenaw over the years was that you could always come to Washtenaw and get a game. I mean, there were no real cliques. You could just you didn't have to worry about tea time. You knew there was a group that's going to play at 9 o'clock, and you could show up and you'd be welcome to play.
One of the things that's been somewhat interesting is Washtenaw gone from private to public and back again several times. Have you noticed much of a difference when the club changes from public to private and back again?
Well, I guess I would answer by saying, first of all, most of my history, it was a private club. And I've always thought of it as a private club, and I actually continue to think of it as kind of a private club.
Golf Show, and we're here at the Polo Fields booth with John Myers, who's the head golf professional of Now You've Got More Than One Course.
Yes.
Tell us about all the excitement that's been happening there, John.
Well, it's a lot of excitement for us this year. Being bought out, Washtenaw Country Club, it's long-standing traditional golf course, was bought out by the Polo Fields this year. So not only do you get a fine golf course in the Polo Fields by Bill Newcomb, but now also you get a classic golf course in Washtenaw Country Club.
And I think that course, the Washtenaw Country Club course, is more than 100 years old, isn't it?
Correct. It was established in 1899, been around for a long time. Donald Ross did oversee some of the work out there, and it's just your classic traditional golf course. It's one that you can't find anymore in the state of Michigan, really.
So from my own perspective, it hasn't changed, especially since Dave Kendall and his group acquired the club. There are a group of us that still think of ourselves as members, I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
So there are some differences, but it operates pretty much the same for me in my life.
Yeah. So I think one of the significant things about a club or a group of people who keep coming and playing is you know a lot of people. Everybody knows your name.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, there's always been a group, and that kind of, I think, goes back to when Tom Talkington came here as the pro in the early 50s. I mean, Tom did an awful lot to develop golf at this club, and he was responsible for kind of forming some groups that have lasted over the years. And but that's the way Washtenaw has been. There's always been a group that you could play with, and you knew everybody, and it's made it a very comfortable place to be. In the Men's Invitational started here at Washtenaw, which turned out to be one of the best invitationals in the state of Michigan. It was different than almost anybody else's. It was a four-man teams, and Tom just promoted golf. And if there was an event, I mean, you'd walk into the pro shop and he said, "Have you signed up yet for this weekend?" That was important. I mean, to get people to participate.
So you recruited people for this.
He sure did.
Yeah.
He sure did.
And sometimes clubs have tournaments on Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. Seems to be a typical time for tournaments. Was that true here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, big events. I mean, and most of those events were couples events.
Oh, okay.
I mean, mixed events.
Wow.
And I think one of the interesting things was that they would have an event, we'll say, on the 4th of July, and it would be maybe 4 or 5 member teams, and they would be made up of, just various aspects of the membership. I mean, the pro shop, I think, put the teams together, and I always thought that the most interesting thing was that the very best men's players always participated in those events.
Oh, okay. Now that makes a difference when the good guys are, everybody's out to beat them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too that you mentioned couples, and one of the things I was struck by was the extent to which women have always had a really strong presence here. In fact, of the original 99 members, 11 of them were women. That had to be unusual.
Well, I think it was unusual, and you're right, it was a very important and maybe sometimes overlooked factor here at Washtenaw. Lynn Whitmire, who was a charter member of the club and remained a member for the rest of her life, I think was a really, really important part of Washtenaw, because you may have seen all of the scrapbooks that have been prepared.
Haven't seen inside all of them, but I've seen them all out on a table. Yeah.
Right, and a lot of those are made up of newspaper articles.
Okay.
And in those days, you could write your article and take it to the newspaper, and they would publish it. Well, I would say that probably 90% of those and all of those books were written by Lynn Whitmire.
Okay.
And published in the Ypsilanti Press. And when you think about it, I mean, the press has always been an important thing. And if you have an organization, and every week there's an article, or even more than one article in the newspaper about your organization.
Yeah.
That's good, right?
That's in a way, that's marketing.
It's great marketing,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
and so I think that is really true. Another factor in terms of women's participation was with the junior program. It was really the women that ran the junior program, and so particularly in my memory, Doris Greenstreet and Lil Dobbs, both of whom had children here, kind of started the junior program, and it really was a wonderful program. And it did involve not only golf, but I mean, we elected officers and kind of ran our little junior golf association ourselves.
So you were really one of the mainstays of the junior golf program here.
You know, we've had a lot of great players come out of this area. I mean, you got Doug Davis, the Ream boys, Jeff and Frank Ream, the Muirs, Kev. I mean, we've had a lot. Jeff Dobbs won the state championship in high school. I won the state championship in high school.
More than
My brother
once.
Tim. I mean, this was a hotbed for junior. Ed Humanick, who played on the tour for 8 years. You know, just a lot of really good players came out of here.
Well, it sounds more complicated than it might seem, because not only are you recruiting kids, but you have to teach them how to play golf.
Yeah, right. And again, I mean, I mentioned those two by name because they kind of headed it up. But I mean, every junior day, I mean, there were plenty of women here they had to walk with the little kids and try to teach them not so much golf maybe, but at least the etiquette of golf.
That's a huge story of golf, isn't it?
Right.
That's pretty cool. Well, during the time that you've been here, you've probably known quite a few of the pros. How about someone like Jim Applegate?
Well, Jim, kind of followed, really, I knew Larry Pentuck. He was just here for a year or two, and then Tom Talkington had a long stay here at Washtenaw, and then Randy Erskine came along. And Jim, I think, maybe followed Randy. He was close, someplace in that pecking order. And, I mean, one of Jim's characteristics was that he was a great manager. I mean, everything ran really, he was a perfectionist, I think. So, if you were having a tournament, you might find that all of the golf carts were out there in a perfect circle, to start the day, and everything was done just exactly right. And I think at one point, Jim was hoping maybe he could become the general manager and run the whole club, and it might have been a good idea if that had happened, but it didn't. Jim was a really good person and did a good job here.
Well, the years kind of had several facets of that job himself.
Well, Randy sure was special. I mean, of course, he was a special golfer to begin with, and had a history of playing good golf at a very high level. And then, of course, he had a great personality, and he had Judy too, his wife, and she participated heavily in running the pro shop, and I think doing the buying and marketing of the pro shop. And so Randy was a wonderful asset to have at Washtenaw.
What about
in all those amateur victories, what was one that stood out more than maybe any of the others?
Well, I have to say it was the Michigan medal play at Washtenaw Country Club, because I really never knew if I could win anything until I actually did. Nobody knows that, and once you go through the experience of winning, it helps your momentum for future tournaments. So that first win, and then the next few years after that, I won the Michigan Amateur. So then I knew that I could play within Michigan, but I didn't have any idea that I could play nationally also, which came about later on.
Randy and Judy lived next door to us, and after they left and some other people moved in, we were talking to them about Randy, and lights went off and they said, "Oh, that's why there are 16-foot ceilings in the house, so he could swing a club."
Right.
Yeah. How about Jeff Cummings, another one who was a pro?
Well, Jeff was here for a fairly short period of time,
Okay.
and he was here during one of the situations where there was a real bad storm right before the Women's Invitational, and a lot of trees came down, and so in my memory, I kind of remember, Jeff was out there with a chainsaw helping cut up the trees and get them off the fairways, so they could actually play the tournament. He was a friendly person, but only here for, I think, a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another one that comes to mind is Tom Deaton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tom Deaton came here, I think, primarily to be an instructor.
Okay.
I mean, he had been a long-time pro at, I think, at Franklin Hills Country Club, and retired maybe from there, I'm not sure. And so you would mostly see Tom down on the practice tee giving lessons.
Okay.
That seemed to be his main role during the period of time he was here. And that was also for a fairly short period of time, maybe a year or so.
Well, it's interesting that you mention instruction, and that's obviously got to be part of it. Every golfer, no matter how, even the pros, always practice and always try to get better. And who are some of the other people who've been responsible for instruction here?
Wow. Well, of course, it was almost always the pros that were doing it. Again, I go back to Tom Talkington. He had an assistant, Gary Carley, who eventually became the head pro at the leading country club in Indianapolis, Indiana. And both of them were good instructors. It was harder back then because there was no practice range. So you had to go down here, like maybe next to number 18 green, and hit balls out into the fairway, and you had to have caddies out there picking up the balls. So, but all of the pros, I think, that were here were instructors, and some probably better than others.
Yeah. Well, the practice range now, didn't there used to be a pool there?
Correct. There was a swimming pool right out here in front of where we're sitting, and so I think that pool was built around 1952 or 3, and was there for, well, it was still there when my kids were growing up in the 70s. And it was actually, they started a small practice range even when the pool was there, and then were able to enlarge it when the pool was removed. So I think originally the first tee for Washtenaw was more in front of where we're sitting, so that's why there wasn't room for a practice range. So when they moved the tee over, then it made more space.
Okay. And then they opened another smaller pool up front and closed that recently.
Correct. Yeah. I think after this pool was taken out, there may have been a few years without a pool, and the idea was that a country club should have a pool, and so a new pool was constructed. Right?
Yeah.
And there were tennis courts at one point.
There were
too. Yes.
Where were they?
Well, they were just to the east of where the pool was out here. But,
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. There have been a number of people who have been through the years the movers and shakers of the club, and some characters. And one of the ones who comes to mind is Ben Taylor, who was the manager of the men's locker room.
Ben was very special, right? And there are a lot of things, probably a lot of stories that could be told about Ben, but I'll tell you my favorite story.
Okay.
So Ben was here when they redid the locker room, and so we all got new lockers at that point. And so Ben came to me one day and he said, "Mr. Nelson," he said, "I don't want you ever to forget your combination for your locker." He said, "So I'm going to write it right here inside your locker." So that was Ben.
Which is a great place in case your locker's locked.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. That's pretty cool. Well, some of the other people, you already mentioned Randy Erskine. How about Shirley Spork?
Well, I only know that Shirley Spork by name.
Okay.
You know, she participated in the exhibition that they had for the 50-year anniversary, and I think she was a young, maybe a student at Eastern or Michigan at the time,
Okay.
but she went on to, you know, have a career in golf and
Yeah.
play, I think, on the women's tour even.
Yeah.
But I really didn't know her, or ever, I don't
Yeah.
think I ever saw her.
But she was a name that people knew.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, the club had some pretty dramatic events, including a big fire in 1987. What happened to people playing golf when the club itself had a big fire?
Well, really nothing happened to the people playing golf. They set up what I guess today would be called a food truck down near number 10T, and so the golf course was open the whole time, and there was no interference in terms of golf. And the people that ran the food truck were, they were serving mostly, sandwiches and hamburgers and that sort of thing. But you could get food and you could get beverages, and some people thought that was one of the best times at Washtenaw during that period of time while the house was being reconstructed.
Yeah. Well, when something that dramatic happens, is there a committee of people who get together and plan a new building, or what happened?
Well, Washtenaw always been, as a private club, was operated by a board of directors, and so there was a board, and yes, there was a lot of planning that had to go on, and I think that during that period of time there was probably a lot of ideas as to what should happen in terms of rebuilding, and I think fortunately the clubhouse was rebuilt more or less like the original.
Okay.
It doesn't have an upstairs that the original had, but it kept the same footprint, and of course both ends were still here after the fire.
So it's just the middle that burned.
Yeah, the middle is the part that burned.
Yeah.
And
what happened to trophies and things like that?
well, those were pretty much preserved.
Okay.
I think. There are some of the trophies are now on display in the pro shop, and I don't think that there was too much in the way of loss there, and all of the history of the club was pretty well maintained. All of those scrapbooks and things were in the office, which was upstairs and was not affected by the fire. So I don't think there was a great deal of loss except for the structure.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, we're looking out, and the sun has come out, and the course, as usual, looks just beautiful. Talk a little bit about the course, and what are some of your favorite holes?
Well, I thought you would probably ask me how the course had changed.
Okay, I'll ask you how the
over
course has changed.
years, but for me, the big changes over the years. One was irrigation when they started to water, had the ability to water all of the fairways, and then of course trees. Everybody talks about the trees on Washtenaw, and a lot of them. Some of them were planted when I was a child, and I saw them all grow up, like the willow.
So the trees grow up.
Willow trees down here on 7 and 8, and then there's been a change over the years in the creek that goes through Washtenaw is Paint Creek, and it was just a natural creek, and there were not much in the way of ponds, and I think it was probably in the 70s when the Drain Commission, actually they wanted to put the whole creek in a pipe and run it through here. And Nick Roberts was pretty instrumental in negotiating with the Drain Commission, and that resulted in us getting some ponds and maintaining most of the natural creek that came through the club. So
no pipe.
No pipe, and so nice pond in front of 18 and a pond down in front of number 7, and so those were changes that took place. And then on holes 15 and 16, when I was a young person here, there was no pond on 15 and 16. There might have been a pond in the spring, but during the summer there was no pond there. So that was one of the big changes when they actually started pumping water in there and created a permanent pond. In terms of favorite holes, I mean, this is a wonderful golf course. I mean, all of the holes are really great holes. I think for me, one of the hardest holes is number 17. It's a fairly long par 4, and then when you get on the green, you can be in a lot of trouble on the green.
You're right about it's beautiful all up and down, and a lot of that does have to do with the landscaping and the trees. And I think the trickiest part about trees on a golf course is they grow.
They sure do.
And I know when Ray Hearn came in, some of the trees aren't here anymore.
I got this message from Ray Hearn, and it's and I call him back, and I get a recorder, and it says Ray Hearn Golf Associates. So we get hooked up. He comes in. I said, Ray, you're in the golf business. What do you do? Oh my gosh, long pause. I'm a golf course architect.
Okay, so this hole, number 14, par 3, plays about 180, depending on which tee position you play from. The left side, a couple years ago, I took out 15 or 16 trees, big old black oaks and hickories. At one point, you could not hit a fade. If you're right-hander, you couldn't hit a fade on this hole. Now we open it up and you can curve a little fade in. We're public now, so 80% of golfers hit a fade or a slice. So we made.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we made it a lot easier for the average golfer to play well on this hole. Years ago, you would almost have to hit a draw into here, or a straight shot, which not many people can hit a straight shot. We also made the approach area squared and much wider, and there used to be a strip of rough between the approach and the green, and now we mow that all the way up to the green, into the green basically. So it's just trying to make it a little easier. This hole is always really tough, and it's still a tough hole.
Aren't here anymore.
Yeah, a lot of trees have been removed, and that seems to be the modern thing to do with golf courses, is old golf courses, is to remove trees. And I think they've done a really wonderful job. I mean, they've cleaned up some areas. They've taken trees out where you had to negotiate a tree even if your ball was in the fairway. And I think that it was pretty dramatic when you saw all those trees going down. But when you see the result, I think it's all quite positive.
Yeah. It makes a difference because, like you say, they grow, and you can cut back a few limbs here and there, but that doesn't last very long.
Yeah, I think in terms, if you talk about growth, at one point, for 150-yard markers, they put little pine trees in on each side of the fairway, and they were, about 2 feet tall when they were planted, and then after a while they got to be maybe 30 or 40 feet tall.
That's a new one. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So you're getting ready to go play pretty soon, so we don't want to keep you much longer, but if you had to tell somebody who knew nothing about this course, how would you describe it to them?
Well, I would say you're going to like it, and I think you're going to like playing here, and you're going to enjoy the people that are here, and if you want a nice sandwich or salad, you can get that after you play as well. But I think Washtenaw has always been welcoming. I think it continues to be, and it's a real asset for the community. And sometimes I don't know if the community as a whole recognizes that, but it's a great asset for the Ypsilanti area.
Well, Jim Nelson, I think you're an asset to the community. So thank you so much for telling us the story here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate having the chance.